Yes, it's John G. Sutton, Tales from the Jail. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about remand prisoners terminating their stay by committing suicide. It's been in the press today, it's been reported today that during the period September 2020 to September 2021, throughout the prison system in the UK, there was 81 suicides of remand prisoners. That's not prisoners who are sentenced, it's prisoners who are awaiting trial on remand in HM prisons. The psychologists believe that the reason for this is that people held on remand have no definite view of which way their sentence is likely to go, and the future is extremely dubious for them, and they become despairing. There was a case of one young man who'd been sentenced to, no, he hadn't been sentenced, he'd been sentenced by the court to be remanded in custody pending trial, and he did tell them, he said, I won't last 2 days in prison. He eventually killed himself after 6 days. But you see, he'd had previous attempts at terminating his existence, and yet they still put him in remanded into prison. One of the big problems that you've got with people being remanded into prison is that a great number of people, since the closure of the mental institutions, the mental hospitals, the big old Victorian type workhouses where they kept people who were psychiatrically disturbed, they no longer exist. It's care in the community. That's what they call it now. And people are required or expected to attend to receive medication. And the new medication, psychotropic drugs that they are injected with on a monthly or every 28 days, I think it is, basis, are usually sufficient to maintain them. People who are suffering from things like paranoid schizophrenia, which would normally have been detained in places like Rampton or the great big old Victorian hospitals, which you will have seen, and the conditions in there were dubious to say the least. But now people are in the community and they're being treated. But if they miss their medication, if they aren't medicated, then they go off to subsequently commit offences. Despite committing these offences whilst being psychiatrically certifiable, they are sent to prison. Of course, when they get to prison, their mental conditions deteriorate, and the result is that a number of these people do end up taking their own lives. My own father was telling me that the most ingenious method of somebody killing themselves in the prisons or in the police cells that he'd encountered during his time was an individual who they knew he was suicidal, because he'd said, listen, I'm not doing this, I'm going to terminate myself. You're not going to do that. And they made sure that he had like a special clothing on that he couldn't rip. He wasn't allowed any shoes with laces on or a belt or anything like that. And they were keeping a watch on him virtually 24/7. But he then required to go to the toilet. And what he did, and this is diabolical to think that anybody would be so desperate that they would do this, he stuck his head in the toilet bowl and threw himself backwards, breaking his neck. And that's where my father found him. He had managed to escape. Well, his soul had escaped. His body was in the lavatory. What a disgrace it is. I see in the news also that the Barlinnie jail in Scotland is being closed. It's going to close in 2026, I believe. It's going to be replaced by something called HM Prison Glasgow. The Barlinnie has been used as a site of execution from 1945 to 1965, because that's when Barlinnie was opened in 1945. It's not a panopticon, it isn't. It's built very much like Wormwood Scrubs. It's got 5 wings, each independent of the other. Yeah, well, but there's been, I think it was 35 hangings there. No, sorry, 10. There's only been 10 hangings at Barlinnie. The first one being a man called John Lyon, who was a member of a street gang. Glasgow's noted for its gangland warfare, you know. Yeah, and John Lyon was a member of a gang that killed somebody who was a member of another gang. I think it was called the Dougie Street Gang. Anyway, he hung in Barlinnie in the year that it was opened, 1945. So, but they are going to close it down now, and they're going to open a new prison. Yeah, it's nice to know that they're building new prisons, don't you think? Yeah, much good may it do them. Listen, I worked in the prisons for 10 years, it didn't do any good. Inmates that are habitual criminals, inmates that are of a criminal mind will not be rehabilitated by the prison system. All that you're doing is containing lifelong criminals until you open the door and they go back out and start where they left off. The people who are in there, who I would call unfortunate, you know, people who have fallen on hard times, can't pay the rates, rent, whatever it is, can't pay their maintenance. I've seen people locked up for non-payment of maintenance. Seriously. Non-payment of fines. Put them in prison. That'll help them, won't it? I mean, they can't pay the fine. If they could pay the fine, they'd pay the fine. Yeah. Rather than go to prison. But they can't, because they haven't got any money. So they put them in prison. And it's costing the taxpayer approximately £1,000 a week per prisoner to keep them in prison. How does that help anybody? It doesn't help, does it? Yeah. No. So basically, what's been reported in the news today is that remand prisoners are killing themselves at an extreme rate, way and above the national average, and they're killing themselves because they are operating in a hopeless situation. I mean, when we got things like the pandemic, the courts shut. So what did they do? They extended the time limitation on holding people before trial, so that you could be held, instead of being held for 6 months, you could be held for 8 months. But I've seen people who've been held on remand for exceedingly long periods of time because they were considered to be a threat to the community. If you get in prison and you're on remand, just look at it this way: the time that you're in there is off any sentence that you've got. But the problem I have with remand prison is that people should be innocent, presumed innocent, until proven guilty. Of course, if you get people who are truly dangerous, then there has to be action taken to protect the public. Basically, how many people is that? It's not very many. Anyway, that's today's Tales from the Jails, nice and light. I'm going to do, apart from the Barlinnie shutting down, that'll be a step in another direction. I'd say it's a step in the right direction, because who knows what HMP Glasgow is going to look like. I'm going to read you a famous poem now. It's called Casabianca. So, whilst it's not singing, it's not Tales from the Jail, really, is it? It's that time of day, folks. Yeah? I'm going to read you Casabianca by Felicity Hemans. You'll recognise the poem. when I start to read it. You may not recognise it by its name, but as soon as I start to read the poem, you'll think, ah, a famous poem. I never knew what it was called. It's called Casabianca. The boy stood on the burning deck whence all but he had fled. The flame that lit the battle's wreck shone round him o'er the dead. Yet beautiful and bright he stood, as born to rule the storm, a creature of heroic blood, a proud though childlike form. The flames rolled on, he would not go without his father's word. That father, faint in death below, his voice no longer heard. He called aloud, say, father, say, if yet my task is done. He knew not that the chieftain lay unconscious of his son. Speak, father, once again he cried, if I may yet be gone. And but the booming shots replied, and fast the flames rolled on. Upon his brow he felt their breath, and in his waving hair, and looked from that lone post of death in still yet brave despair, and shouted but once more aloud, my father, must I stay? While over him, fast through sail and shroud, the wreathing fires made way. They wrapped the ship in splendour wild, they caught the flag on high, and streamed above the gallant child like banners in the sky. There came a burst of thunder sound. The boy, oh, where was he? Ask of the winds that far around with fragments strewed the sea, with mast and helm and pennon fair, that well had borne their part. But the noblest thing which perished there was that young faithful heart. There you go. Felicity Heman's Casabianca. This is Tales from the Jails. Hope you enjoyed it. Do subscribe and like it and whatever else there is. The boy stood on the burning deck. I will see you again.